Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Produce Buzzers podcast. We are so happy you have joined us today, and I think you will be too after the show is over, because you will learn a lot about fresh fruits and vegetables, how to select and store them, how to prepare and cook them, and surprising facts about their history and origin. We hope it inspires you to eat more fresh fruits and vegetables, not only for your health, but also for your delight and pleasure as you explore their amazing world of taste and delicious flavors. Eating more of them will transform your life in so many positive ways. So settle back, relax, and get ready for another delicious adventure with the Produce Buzzers. Greetings, Produce Buzzers podcast fans. Welcome to another delicious episode of the Produce Buzzers podcast. I'm Edwin Stepp, your host and executive editor of ProduceBuzz.com. I'm joined once again by Teresa Nolan, the president and founder of Produce Buzz, along with Rick Stepp and Cynthia Benedetto, both contributing editors to Produce Buzz. Now, Produce Buzzers podcast fans, can you believe it's already July? The year is half over. Seems like it just began. But we are so happy that July is here because, as you know, July is a time to celebrate one of the most important dates on the yearly calendar, a time to honor a huge part of American tradition and heritage, a time that brings people together around the summertime table to sup on the sweet joy and the pursuit of happiness. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's time to celebrate Independence Day, July 4th. Yes, it is. And that's a very important commemoration, of course, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about another celebration. We are talking about National Watermelon Month.
Yay!
Yes, July is National Watermelon Month, and there is no fruit that we love to celebrate more than watermelons. And today we have a very special guest who knows more about watermelons than probably anybody on the planet, I'm guessing. Rachel Syngo is Chief Marketing Officer of Melon One, the oldest and largest shipper of watermelons in the United States. She has real passion for the work she is doing, which is why we are delighted to have her on the podcast to share that passion, since we are all about passion for everything fruit and veggie. Rachel joined the Melon One team in 2016 and is central in the sales and marketing for the company. But she goes back further than that when it comes to agriculture and watermelon. She is in the 8th generation of her family to work in agriculture and specifically to watermelon farming. So we are delighted to have Rachel with us today to help us celebrate National Watermelon Month. Rachel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. That is a fantastic introduction. I will do my best to live up to all of that. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. This is certainly a big month for us in what we do. So we're happy to celebrate in every way, on every platform that we can.
Yeah, I know you'll live up to it. I've talked with you enough at the conventions, and we had you on as a guest last year, which was great to have you, and we're so thrilled you came back. Remind our listeners about the history of Melon One. You told me that it's the oldest watermelon company in the U.S., so remind them. We have new listeners who probably didn't hear the last podcast as well. So.
All right, so Melon One is a grower, packer, and shipper of watermelon here in the United States. And we also have a crop in Guatemala that is our own, that we harvest from and ship into the United States a couple months out of the year when we cannot feasibly grow anywhere on U.S. soil. So we operate 365 days a year, growing, packing, and shipping watermelon, and watermelon only. So the history is expansive yet simple. So we have 3 owners at Melon One: Rich Chastain, John Lapede, and Hamilton Dix. And in 1997, they formally came together to form Melon One with multi-generations of experience. So each of them joined the business because their fathers were in the business and their fathers before that. But those 3 gentlemen combined, and they had business relationships, whether they were with retailers or growers, dating all the way back to 1935 that were still in existence. So
wow.
Platform, that is where we claim the oldest But by volume, we are the largest. We ship more
Okay.
watermelons as an organization as Melon One than anyone else in the country.
Hence the name Melon One, I think.
Number one at Melons.
Not just by volume, but I think quality and taste. I'm sure that you would claim that, and
We
probably rightfully so.
like to think we know what we're doing. We're kind of a one-trick pony, though, right? We don't dabble in anything else. We try to do this one thing as good as we possibly can. So
Well,
that's always
that's fantastic. Yeah, great. Well, now remind our listeners about your history with the company. We teased it a little bit, but give us a little refresher.
formally. I came back in a full-time year-round capacity in 2016. But my father is one of the owners of Melon One. So I joke and I tell people it's probably not an overstatement to say I was born to be in this business. Um, the predominantly all members of my family on all sides, amongst my dad and my uncles and all the way, the other children in their family, and a lot of my cousins have been in farming and watermelon farming, and a part with Melon One, whether we buy their watermelons to ship or they work with the organization directly. So I was one of the few, though, that said, not for me. No, I did enough summers and weekends and all of that through high school, and I did my time. I'm off a forklift. I'm going to college. I'm doing something else. I'm blazing a trail. And it's weird, and we'll come back to this, I'm sure, but passion has a way of finding you no matter where you go. So I did. I got that degree. I started working for Target Corporation. I ended up in grocery operations anyway. And it was like, wow, I'm just going to keep talking to people about watermelons while I'm here. Thing I know the most about. And I had a really great experience there. But one day I got the call, which was, hey, we've sent you off into the world. You've had a lot of corporate experience. You've learned about things none of us know. Bring it on home. It's time to come back if you'll have us. And I think I was ready. I always probably deep down somewhere in there knew that this is where I always needed to go, but I needed to spread my wings a little bit. And it has been great to be back. I've been back since 2016. A lot has changed, and a lot had changed while I was gone. The company grew exponentially, and we were really ready to start expanding sales and marketing and some of those buckets, really formulating a brand that had a little brand recognition. And those are some of the things that I started tackling when I got here.
Fantastic. Would it be fair to say you can take the girl out of the watermelons, but you can't take the watermelons out of the girl? Isn't that fit?
How you would word it, but I would say that anyone who went to college or worked with me professionally or were friends with me or roommates that I had would tell you you couldn't take it away. It was always a topic. I had a lot of pride. I think everyone in agriculture has a lot of pride, right? It's such a noble trade. Um, However, in watermelons, they're fun and they're a good time. And when you can say to your friends, hey, I'm just going to go get one from the farm, it's going to be great. They're like, oh my gosh, the general public is so far removed from that. So to be able to have a friend that, I was the farm girl. Yes, absolutely. It was, let me bring my city friends out to the field and have my dad show them around. That happened countless times. And now I can just do it myself. Hey, y'all come on.
That's great. Yeah, so we were the same way. We grew up, I think I told you, my father grew apples and vegetables here in North Carolina and had a packing house. And I tried to flee from it. I did for a certain degree, but the passion never went away. And Teresa started her business marketing and merchandising in the produce industry and represented some of the biggest companies. And so she called me back and Rick back to work with her for a while. And then the whole idea behind this podcast was our passion for fresh fruits and vegetables and trying to spread that. But anyway, enough about me and us. How's the spring and summer season going for Melon One?
Melon One has had a very good year. I would say most watermelon growers have had a really decent year. Some of our biggest struggles are always going to be weather. However, we've been pretty fortunate, all things considered, during planting seasons and regions where we are. And so we're East Coast based. Our season really starts in Florida with the domestic season. And we've been very fortunate. We've avoided some complete catastrophes. Now, there have been pockets of hail. There's been pockets of frost. There's been pockets of flooding. But overall, that has managed really well, which has created a very good watermelon crop and a series of good watermelon crops, which has kept the quality all of that affects quality of watermelons. It just does. So we've had a good, consistent crop. Therefore, we're putting good, consistent product in grocery stores. And we know from consumer data, right? If you have a great piece of probably any fruit, but certainly watermelon, you're more likely to go back that week to get another one instead of, that one was okay. Maybe if I get around to it, maybe if I felt like they were on sale. But when you have a really good piece, it makes you want to go back.
Yeah.
And we've seen a lot of that this year. Watermelon demand happens to be watermelon, whole watermelon in a store and cut fruit. The demand is up. Those categories are actively growing. So we're very fortunate in that way.
Yeah, great. I had some questions on this earlier, but since you touched on it, Ari, about the weather conditions and the challenges growing the fruit, let's go there while it's on my mind so I don't forget. What does hail do to affect the crop in a bad way?
So what hail does is we all know what hail looks like. We know what it can do to your car, right? Now imagine that on the rind of a watermelon. Well, a rind is 3/4 of an inch or so thick on a fully mature watermelon. It's going to pepper it. It's going to hit it. It's going to leave dents. At a minimum, if the watermelon isn't fully mature yet, it's going to continue to grow. The rind is going to kind of continue to heal. So it could leave just scratches and dents. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, a quality assurance manager for a grocery store chain is going to reject that fruit. No, it looks funny. Consumers aren't going to buy it. We got to move on.
Even if the fruit inside is perfect and delicious, right?
It is perfectly good. So that is certainly, in my opinion, a flaw with the way we shop, right? We all say that, we know the inside's good. We don't want food waste. However, we all look for the best of whatever the product may be in front of us. So there is a natural deterrence there, but it's not to say we trash all of that or we leave it in the field. As long as it is still edible, what the practice is at Melon One is, depending on where our field locations are, we do have quite a few customers who do juicing. We have some breweries we work with. We have some wineries. Now, they don't care what the inside or what the outside looks like because they're only using the inside. So we will try to, of course, sell what we can. That we are a for-profit business. If we cannot, almost every region we are in, we either have our own cows. So Melon One owns quite a few ranches with cattle operations. And watermelon is an excellent added nutritional benefit for cows. So you can dump them in a pasture. They don't get wasted. The cows will eat every piece of them. And or another grower, if we're working with them, there's either a farm nearby or they have their own cows or hogs or something of that sort. Even goats. Sometimes it's just a neighboring farm says, hey, we'll take whatever falls on the ground and splits open, we'll take that too. So hail, if it has an effect in that way, we can take them, whether it's unfortunately by the truckload, and or just a pile of them, a bin or so. We don't let anything go to waste. It's not sitting on the ground and rotting. If we can, for sure.
No, that's good to hear. All right, I'm going to jump to something else now because I've been seeing some trending posts on social media about watermelon that seem to be concerning people out there, and I think probably it's a little bit of hype. But can you tell us about that? Some of these things that are springing up on social media about watermelon.
So I would say there's always been a little bit of misinformation about watermelon for years. So one of the biggest ones is that a seedless watermelon must be a GMO crop. I'll keep that one short and sweet. It's not. We created non-GMO seedless watermelons just by crossbreeding different watermelon plants. So to be a genetically modified organism, you have to introduce some other DNA from another thing. So if we had put porcupine in there, then it would be GMO. But we didn't, so they're still just watermelon. They're not a GMO. The big ones that are very popular, and social media is ever evolving, but the amount of views some of these things get as maybe conspiracy theories really have taken off. So one of the biggest is that watermelon growers in the US are injecting their watermelons with either something to make them more red and or something to preserve them longer or added sugars. I will say that one is a little bit based on something that could be true. So in India, that is a practice, and they just banned it. So when it made the headlines that they had banned it, that obviously traveled to the US, and the assumption when they're reading these articles was that we were doing it here. So at least that
before harvest.
Pardon me?
The injections whether it be sugar or color, is it pre-harvest or post?
The way it is insinuated is post, and actually with like actual needles and injectors. So like not through drip tape, not like we're injecting it to the plant. No, like they're actually like pictures of needles next to a watermelon, a very extreme kind of skull and crossbones situation. First of all, labor will always be too expensive to do that in the United States. We're only talking about a product that's $5 or $6. And second of all, the FDA does not allow it. So very simple to debunk. It's very easy to find. It's on our watermelon.org website, which represents all watermelons in the US. We are not able to adulterate watermelons in any way, shape, or form. Believe it or not, they're just that sweet and that red. Kudos to the watermelon farmers. Just believe it. We're killing it. I know they're so good. It's hard to believe, but that's just how they are.
Yeah.
So we have had a little bit of debunking. There's another big one that folks, and I do think I know where this comes from, so I'll touch on it. But quote unquote rubber watermelons have taken a little bit of a stronghold in the fruit TikTok world. Folks are saying, I bought this watermelon and now I've cut it and it doesn't break when I try to bend it in half. It bends and it's floppy and the texture is no good. And why are they selling us rubber watermelons? What? Well, why indeed? I think if we stopped and asked ourselves that question and went past the headline, the TikToks would stop soaring, because surely why would anyone sell you a quote unquote rubber watermelon? But there isn't any actual thing that is causing that either. This is a simple part of the breakdown process. If a watermelon sits long enough, it's going to get a funny texture to it. That is just a reality. Before it gets sickeningly sweet and before it gets grainy and breaks down, it's going to get a little bendy and rubbery. Rubber is probably a really extreme word that I would not have used ordinarily to describe that phase. However, what an amazing time to be alive, where we are so far removed from our roots that now videos of almost decomposing fruit are viral. That's kind of...
Well, I would think that would be a great selling point. If you get the watermelon and it's a little bit rubbery, take it back to your retailer. Sorry, retailers, because it's old. It's, it's not going to hurt you, but it's past. It's like,
Whether you cut, obviously you've cut it at that point. We have people reach out to us and say, hey, I cut into it and it was just no good. So there are things that can happen depending on how you feel. There's a lot of folks in this country, and I commend them for it, that really want a zero food waste situation. So they don't want to take it back to the store. They don't want to throw it away. They don't, never mind the money they spent. They're just frustrated now. It's wasteful. And we know all the dynamics going on around the globe. We don't want to waste food. So at that point, as long as it's not actually rotten, and people got to use a little common sense, but if it smells bad, obviously it tastes bad, don't eat it. But if it doesn't, but it just has a funny texture, throw it in a blender, throw it in a juicer, make it a smoothie. You can do a lot of things still with that. It's not totally wasted. And I know we were going to get to it, but I'm going to jump there. I'm going to steal.
Go for it.
You can eat the whole watermelon. We don't have to waste any anyway. The rind is a magical thing we've all discovered. It's edible. So there's a lot of really neat ways you can consume the whole watermelon with no waste. If that's how you feel about it. If you absolutely don't want to, you absolutely don't have to.
Right. Let me follow up on that, on the rind thing, because I want to get her recommendations on what's the best way to use that rind.
So the oldest way is to pickle watermelon rind, which same as a pickle, right? Which we all know used to be a cucumber. That, well, I think we all know that, right? I hate to assume nowadays, but so a watermelon's closest living relative is a cucumber. So the rinds taste very similar. So you can put them in vinegar, add flavor if you want. Watermelon rind pickles, very simple. But my favorite, which is fairly new, is to shred that down like a slaw. Watermelon rind makes an excellent coleslaw. So if you don't have cabbage available, and if you even like cabbage and that, it gives it a very different texture. You can leave very much the skin on it or off, depending on how much crunch you want. And you can make that in a sweeter alternative, right? You could use watermelon juice in it along with mayonnaise and all the other ingredients, or not. So I think that's a really creative way chefs have come up to recently to really put watermelon rind to use, really good use.
That's a great, I never thought of that. That's a fantastic, I'm going to do it.
I'm thinking, like, Rick, you have not piped in here that, like, either some brandy or some scotch or something like that.
Well, I would like to say this. I always cut the unusable rind up into chunks and put it in my salad. It tastes better than a cucumber.
Oh, really? Well, if Rick
Yes.
says it, it's true. You
Yep.
heard it.
But
Better
I
than
don't
cucumber.
drink. I don't mix it with the drinks. I mean, oh yeah, actually, I did the other day. I put some watermelon juice in my brandy.
Well, I would
Yeah.
imagine yeah, exactly. If she's saying like put it in with like pickle it, like
Yeah.
it's not too far of a stretch to go put in some liquor.
Yeah, you could. Yeah.
That would never be too much of a stretch for the Melon One team anyway. We'll add liquor in and make a margarita in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But I would like to say, I'm serious about this. If you're using a watermelon, do not buy cucumbers. Cut up the rind that you would normally not eat with maybe a little bit of red flesh on there,
Yeah.
and it's better than cucumbers.
Oh my gosh.
That's good.
As a true
So-
alternative to cucumbers, it's happening today, Rick. It's happening
Okay.
today.
Well, what I'm surprised we haven't heard from Rick, though, we have a running gag with Rick because he microwaves everything.
Put
as
it in the
vegetables.
microwave.
So, okay, Rick, what's your
That's how it
microwave
gets
recipe?
rubbery.
I cannot
That's
think
how
of
it gets
any way I
rubbery.
would microwave a watermelon. I cannot think of one.
Well, he stumped Rick. We stumped him on he has a microwave
Maybe
recipe
you
for
could
everything.
maybe you could heat the juice up in the microwave and have a little
Yeah.
warm watermelon juice, you know?
You could.
I want to go off on the Melon One team's recipes for putting liquor in the watermelon. I've seen these where you drill a hole in and put the vodka in. What's your recipe, your go-to recipe there?
So if you've seen it, I assure you we've tried it. Yes, I would say the hole in it in the bottle of vodka goes very well to make it to where then when you cut the watermelon, right? Whether you're putting it in chunks or slices, there you go. You're ready for a party. That would be an easy way to keep the fruit maintained. Now we have even taken all the watermelon out and then put a Jello concoction back in and still sliced it into a giant slice. Adorable, big party favor. And we have done a lot on our own, for better or worse, mixing different watermelon juices in with different liquors, whether they're warm and you're making an old fashioned and you put in an extra watermelon juice in instead of a sugar cube. We have absolutely experimented with margaritas, with tahini, with hot honey, all of those kinds of dynamics just to see what the best watermelon cocktail is.
Are these recipes on your website?
We do have quite a few on our website, and we do work very closely with the Watermelon Board. So watermelon.org has hundreds of recipes. We have all of our favorites, though, on the Melon One website. Yes.
Okay, and that's melon1.com.
MELON, the numeral 1.com.
Okay,
Very
very good. Check it out, listeners. There's a lot of helpful information there. And probably information about how to pick a good watermelon, which I know a lot of our listeners are tuning in, waiting for this segment. Rachel, you're the expert.
Here we go. I'm gonna keep it short and simple for everybody today. So when you go to the watermelon bin or the back of the truck on the side of the road or your favorite farmer's market, you are first and foremost, always, every time, looking for a yellow, quote unquote, belly or a ground spot. That is where it's the indication watermelons grow on the ground. We do not go out during the day and turn them so that the rind perfectly makes a symmetrical circle. Again, labor is expensive. So watermelons will always have a ground spot where it sat and grew on the ground. And as that turns the color of butter yellow or darker, you know that your watermelon is ripe. That means it has a full flavor profile, a good Brix measurement, which is part of your soluble sugars. So ultimately, you know that watermelon is going to be good. Even if it looked funny, a yellow spot will at least indicate that it's going to taste good. So that's your number one. We don't negotiate on that because a watermelon does not continue to ripen once it's cut off the vine.
Right.
So the second one that's usually pretty important is you want to lift up a watermelon. A watermelon should feel heavy for its size. It's 92% water. It should feel heavy for its size. And then the other thing that you can check out, you pick up the watermelon, turn it, look at it. Does it have any funny shapes or lumps or bumps on it? That could make it a little misshapen on the inside. Now you're going to hear a lot about thumping out on the interwebs and amongst your friends. Everyone hears a little different though, so it's hard to convey thumping. What I would tell you, if you must thump, is you are looking to hear it echo back as though it was hollow inside, kind of like a seashell, right? When you hold it up, you want to hear the ocean. When you hit on a watermelon, you want it to echo back. If it has a very dull thud, I don't know if that'll come through on the podcast, but I just hit my desk.
Yeah.
That's more of an indicator that it might have that broken heart through the middle, which is just a split in the watermelon. It can happen if they don't get pollinated exactly correct by the bees. It's not harmful. You can eat it. The sugar concentrates in the cracks. It's okay too. So the one I always tell my friends and family is just look for the yellow spot. And then of course, if you were so inclined, if you buy 4 or 5, surely one will be good.
There you go.
I have to ask a question about the maturity.
What's the bricks?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. In the when I say the old days, I'm talking about when we were growing up in the 1960s, 1970s. You could buy a watermelon and all the indication was that it was ripe with the yellow underbelly, et cetera. But then you cut it open and it's like just a terrible flavor. How important is soil science today to get a mature watermelon?
It's a part of it. It certainly is. I would say what we have found, and you'd like to think that all this time later we'd be a little more scientific, but what we have found is that sandy soil, even salty sandy soil, will often produce some of the sweetest fruit. So some of the growers and folks I work with will have to just cover their ears at this point. But the coast in South Carolina, where we grow fall watermelons, and a lot of our soil in Florida puts off a very, very sweet watermelon. And to me, one of the biggest indicators there is the type of soil we grow in. Now, the other factor that can happen anywhere is water. So if that plant, a big rain event comes through a couple of days before you harvest, that plant is absorbing a lot of water and it's pushing it through the vines out to the fruit. So you could get a watermelon that is what we would call in the industry waterlogged. So it looks red, it looks great, you cut it, and it's almost just diluted. It's missing some of the flavor. Now, we're never talking about something that tastes bland completely. It just doesn't have that flavor you were really looking for. More often than not, it's actually a water thing. The plant got more water than it really needed. That's sometimes hard to measure, right? Because as a grower, you're looking for plant health. You want to keep your plant healthy. No different than us gardening our house plants. We tend to overwater them. So that can sometimes happen because we're so concerned on the plant that you're not considering what that looks like on the fruit. The only way to really know that is to cut one open and eat it, which growers are the #1 taste testers. Don't worry. No one takes more pride in that fruit than them.
And we've kind of had a rainy start to the season this year.
Yes, definite areas we have had plenty of water. We'll say it like that. So that could always be a factor, and it's something to consider.
It's lowering the bricks level at that point too, isn't it? Because
yes.
But do your growers do soil samples and then add whatever nutrition they need to the soil?
Soil samples before we plant, but that is so much, there's so many factors involved. One of the big ones is actually not for flavor at all, is you're looking for, there's a couple different soil-borne diseases. A very big one it affects Florida and certain southern growing regions. So you can't, you want to make sure that's not there, right? So we always want to do certain soil samples to make sure certain things aren't present, and then to gauge, what is the nitrogen level of the soil? Watermelons need a lot of nitrogen. So do I need to add any of that? Should I plant a cover crop before I plant my watermelons? So at Melon 1, we plant a lot of sun hemp. So it's a long, tall, skinny yellow flower. If you ever pass it on the roadside, you're like, dang, what is that field? It almost looks like canola growing, if you've ever seen that. It's very bright yellow and beautiful. But we just plant it and then we just disc it down because it puts a ton of biomass and nitrogen back in the ground. So we don't necessarily have to add a nitrogen in a liquid form or a chemical form. We can do that naturally with other plants. So that is often what a lot of our soil sampling will do.
Sure.
So fusarium is the thing we're looking to avoid. In case anyone following also farms, they will know fusarium can be on a telephone pole. It can be anywhere around you, but if it's in your soil, it would prevent a watermelon plant. It'll grow a nice, big, beautiful vine, but no fruit will ever come. And what a waste if you're right. So
yeah. Yeah. Well, you grow watermelons year round. You've already alluded to that. Tell us about the other regions. You've talked a little bit about it, but let's complete that.
We start a calendar year in Guatemala by, December and January. We've started that crop. We will harvest that and import until March. Then in March, we will start in Florida, make our way from the south all the way to the north over a 3-month period. Then we will go to Georgia and then the Carolinas. And then we divide a little bit. We go to Delaware and Maryland. That area is a large growing region for us. Again, salty soil up in that area. And then we go as far west as Kentucky and Indiana. So that'll round us all the way out till the end of September. Then for us as Melon One, we do grow year round. So we have 2 fall crops. We have one in St. Helena Island out on the coast in South Carolina. And we have one back in Punta Gorda, which is our company headquarters back in South Florida. And then from there, that gets us through September, October, November. And then we start our Guatemalan crop in December.
Oh, it's amazing.
And so what's the best bricks level?
So the requirement at any grocery store level is a 10. So your ultimate goal for a good tasting watermelon at minimum is a 10. And then above that, there really is no limit. That no one's saying, well, if it's a 15, we're not taking it. Because really going above and beyond that, then you have to start talking about seeded fruit. So seeded watermelons, which Melon One also grows, they do tend to have a 1 or 2 point higher on the brick scale naturally. They are undeniably, doesn't matter if you like seeded or seedless better. The facts are seeded watermelons do tend to have a little bit higher bricks.
So pun intended, give me the sweet spot. What is the number?
So I think the number's 12. I really do. If I have a watermelon, me personally, I eat a lot, 8th generation person, so I'm a little bit of an expert. 8th generation person, like everyone is an 8th generation. 8th generation watermelon. I would say if it gets a little too sweet, it's too much for me. I can't sit down and eat the whole thing, because when I sit down and eat a watermelon, my serving size is like half the melon. It's not a cup or a slice. I'm in it to win it, so I'm ready to go. So for me, I don't love them completely too sweet. So I would say around a 12, and that's probably the average watermelon anyway.
Do you like cotton candy?
I don't.
Like a fair? Okay, so I'm just trying to see, like you and me, like, I'm going higher.
Cynthia has sweet
ice cream gal, then yes, you're looking for a 13, 14.
Cynthia's sweet teeth have sweet teeth.
Yes,
She loves the more sugar, the better. So we've learned that about her.
As sweet as watermelons are, why do they say they're good for diabetics?
So, watermelons do have a good nutritional profile. They're loaded with multiple different vitamins and well diverse. They have a lot of lycopene in them, which we know is heart healthy. It's the same thing. It's actually what makes the internal flesh red. Same thing that's in tomatoes. So there's a lot of benefits there. Diabetics would, of course, have to be a little more careful. So it is great for diabetics. It's something you can eat in the raw with nothing added to it that still tastes delicious. There's very few things left on this earth that way. However, there is a sugar content and there is a carbohydrate content that is naturally occurring in watermelon. So if you're diabetic, maybe you limit that. They say around 2 cups. That's still a decent amount of watermelon.
Not for me. I'm like you, Rachel. I sit down and eat it, and pretty soon the whole melon's gone. But
there are, I guess, worse ways than death by watermelon. But I'm a little longer, so
I like that. Yeah, that's the way I want to go. I think I'll see if I can work that out.
Just go into a diabetic coma. Like, we'll just make sure that your
yeah, that would be a great way to go, man.
Watermelon would be higher,
especially if you can mix it with the vodka.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
All kinds of good stuff. Depending on who you are. All the registered dietitians are cringing right
now. Yeah. We make no medical claims here. Check with your doctors.
Don't take advice.
So you mentioned the redness, lycopenes, but there's some watermelon that isn't red.
That's a fact.
Tell us, do you grow any that aren't red?
So we grow yellow watermelons, and that's as far as we have gotten into what some would consider an exotic fruit. However, there are yellow watermelons there are orange watermelons, there are actual white flesh watermelons, and then allegedly, I gotta be honest, I haven't seen one, but there supposedly are purple watermelons. I've not seen it, I've not grown it. I have been told you can order the seeds online. That is my fall project. When I get back to Florida this fall, we are absolutely planting 10 plants and seeing what we come up with. But allegedly, they exist. I will assure you, if I pull it off and I grow one and I cut it, you all will be the first to know.
Great.
Is it
We got the scoop.
lavender?
We'll get the
Is
scoop.
it-
The complete lowdown.
The watermelon scoop.
The watermelon sweet spot scoop.
All right, I'm holding you to that, Rachel.
We need a green watermelon.
I'll tell you, can you imagine the St. Patrick's Day sales if I can grow a green?
Oh,
I mean, let's do it. Let's
Yeah.
go.
Well, there's
pouring
probably
the
some
beer
liquor.
in there. Yeah.
There's some liquor, green liquor you could put in there. But white watermelons, I've never heard of that. I imagine they.
I thought those were just unripe ones. No, I'm kidding.
Now you'd have to be careful. So yes, I can grow a white one all day long. They do exist. Those are not predominantly. I don't personally know anyone in the US growing them in the last 10 years, other than one or two to kind of say they did. But as you get into globally, Southeast Asia, certain parts of China, definite parts of Spain, they have really gotten adventurous with some of those and created some actual market demand. So more than someone just buying it one time, they go back to the store and that's what they're looking for.
Yeah, great. Where can I get a yellow watermelon from you? Who are you selling those to?
So if you're ever going to get a yellow watermelon, a lot of times they are in mini form. Melon One does not do that.
I've seen those.
But that does happen a lot. You'll see them through the winter. You can find those anywhere. You could probably find a mini watermelon. But we have a couple different grocery store chains that really have tried to make a mark in that. Kroger, we have had some success with. Just because they're big enough, they can say, hey, here's the red ones on this side and here's the yellow ones on this side. And if you want them, here you go. We have to be very careful with the labeling on those. We've had folks get one and really that's a specialty item, right? And say, oh my gosh, what is this? I cut it open and it's yellow. What's wrong with it? It's like, well, did you look at the label? It had a yellow watermelon on it.
Yeah.
So they're certainly not nearly as dominant as what we all imagine, which is the nice red.
My experience with them is they're not as sweet.
Ultimately, we know that they test the same, right, on a bricks test. But something in the way some people, it depends on your own mind, right?
It's psychological.
Right. If you look at it and you think, oh my gosh, I'm thinking pineapple, and I bite into this, it's like, oh, it's almost sour. And then other folks will be like, oh, I think pineapple is so sweet. So when they bite into it, they think they're sweeter than a red watermelon. But they actually do test the same as far as the sugars go.
Yeah. Well, our listeners like to know how things are grown. So maybe if you can tell them the process from seed to the final harvesting.
So the way we do it, and I would say this is pretty standard for most, American growers, we have found a seed that we like. We know what the end result is already going to look like, how it yields, what it tastes like, what the rind looks like. So we pick the seed, we buy it from the seed company, and then we have it shipped to a greenhouse partner that we work with somewhere within our growing region. They are actually going to sow the seed and grow it from seed to transplant size. So if you are, imagining what that looks like, it's a 2 to 3 inch tall plant with a small root system. And there's around, 124 to 164 in a handheld tray that we are going to walk out. And in our case, every watermelon is still hand planted. So someone's human being hand took that out and hand planted it in the dirt. And man, there is something magic about that. But ultimately, those are going to get planted. They take between 80 and 100 days based on growing region and heat and temperatures until you have fully ripe watermelons ready to go. Each watermelon plant will put off only an average of 2 watermelons, viable watermelons. But that might not be at the same time. One will be ready, and then another one will be ready maybe 2 weeks later. So with that said, when you have 100 acres of watermelons in a field, we're still also harvesting all of them by hand. So that is a crew of people walking out, inspecting the watermelons. In our case, what they do is they cut the watermelon off the vine, and they flip it over so that yellow belly is sticking up. and then they keep on moving along, and then coming behind them is going to be a rehab school bus. So that is a total repurposed thing that, watermelons have really dominated that market of helping school districts sell their buses. And there's then a loading crew that's going to walk through the field, and they're very simply loading the watermelons. They are tossing them up into the buses. Then they make a short trip from the from the field to the packing facility. They're sorted out, they're graded out, right? Anything that's a little too ugly, it's got too much scarring, didn't look like it grew crop properly, wasn't pollinated properly. That's going to get called out. They're going to get packed by size into bins, stacked right up. And by the end of that day, they're going to be on a truck headed to one of your grocery store distribution centers.
Wow.
How many plants per acre?
That depends on the grower. As low as 1,400 plants per acre, as high as 1,800 plants per acre. So that depends on what the grower wants to do and how big they want their watermelons to be. So less plants per acre, the bigger your watermelons will be. If you know you're growing a variety that puts off really big fruit, then you're probably going to plant more per acre. It leaves them less room to grow. Ultimately, the root system,
right.
everything. So it'll reduce the size of the fruit.
Right. Well, you mentioned the seed you use, and you go out and try to find the perfect seeds.
Ew.
I know most of the watermelons you grow are seedless, but and you mentioned that the seeded ones are usually sweeter, and that's kind of my memory going back to my childhood days. They would seem to be a little sweeter, but they're very good now.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering I know in certain parts of the world, like I spent 2 summers in China, and watermelon seeds are like peanuts there. I mean, they eat them like peanuts. What do you say about that? Do you process those in any way?
So we don't. We do grow seeded watermelons. So for every 3 seedless plants, any grower plants, you must plant 1 seeded, and that's for pollination. We all use some form of bees for pollination, and you need the seeded there to make pollination happen for the seedless. So we do have availability. We do ship a lot of seeded watermelons out into the marketplace. But with all that said, we have never dabbled in it. But because we're watermelon fanatics, we have eaten them. We have roasted them. We are not in the business of repurposing them. I know some are, but that isn't nearly the biggest demand over here. We work with a chef who I know some of you have met at trade shows. Chef Joseph Poon does watermelon carvings with us, and he is Chinese. And he goes back and forth to Hong Kong a lot. And he's always, I don't understand why you all aren't using this. I mean, watermelon seed is considered a superfood there. Yeah. So it is loaded with protein and antioxidants. So they are taking that hard black shell for those who are like, what are you talking about, watermelon lady? You can crack that off, if kind of like a sunflower seed if you wanted. If you roasted them and salted them, you could actually crack that off, and there's a smaller true seed inside that you can eat. So that absolutely has its own market, especially in other parts of the world. Some of those seeds are even grinded down into powders and then added to salads as toppers, or they make watermelon seed cookies out of them. I mean, it's a very diverse thing that really the United States has never even touched on. So stay tuned when it happens. We'll be here to make a launch.
It seems like it may not be as commercially profitable. I mean, the work and the labor, but especially if you don't have a demand already, like in China.
Yes. So the demand is certainly not there. And that is all done. So that is mechanized. So they're taking watermelon fruit, they are juicing it, and then they are pulping out the seeds in that case, and then rinsing them, drying them, and packaging them. So that does require a pretty hefty investment, and you would want to make sure there's some kind of demand.
Right. And I remember having them in China. They were delicious. They are very much, eating them is a lot like eating a sunflower seed. You don't get as much meat. Well, you have to work a lot harder to get the same amount of nutrition out of them, but they were delicious. They would soak them in some sort of brine, I think, and it'd be very salty is what I remember.
And I just realized you can roast watermelon seeds in the microwave.
Oh my gosh, we found
yeah, I thought I had him stumped, and here we go.
Well, you did have them because they don't have seeds anymore, but if you could, I live in Minnesota, and I haven't seen a seeded watermelon there in 20 years, but if you had a seeded watermelon, you could roast the seeds in the microwave, because I do it with pumpkin seeds.
Yes. I'll tell you, Rick, it seems as though from a seated conversation point, where there is demand, loud vocal demand, retailers are reacting. So even 5 years ago, we almost didn't sell any of our seeded watermelons to retail stores. We sold a lot directly to farm stands. And folks kind of came to terms with the fact that if you wanted them, that's where you had to go get them. But we have seen large, major grocery store chains say, okay, this pocket, this region is demanding it. They are vocal. They are all over. They're on social media. They're calling the stores. They're leaving messages. So if you rally the troops enough, Rick, I believe that Minnesota,
You'll get a shipment.
you
Well,
can get a shipment.
all the Scandinavians would be, why does this watermelon have seeds? I've never heard
What are
of
these?
such a
What are these things in my watermelon?
That
And they probably have caller ID, Rick, so you can't call 700 times by yourself.
Oh.
Yeah, well, I was surprised to learn that I knew that you needed the seeded watermelons to pollinate, but I was surprised at the ratio. I didn't realize it was 3-to-1.
yes.
Oh, that is.
So you've got a lot of seeded watermelons that you're harvesting, whatever you do with them. But
Can you
We
feed those to the cattle? Obviously, you can.
we absolutely can. Yes,
Yeah.
that's not
yeah,
not a
and
problem. Really, they're
juice.
almost a specialty, which is kind of crazy. You often see. I am sitting right now in Araby, Georgia, which is where Melon One has our Georgia headquarters, and the next town over from us is Cordele, Georgia, which is a
Oh, yeah.
legend in watermelons. Their claim to fame is they're the watermelon capital of the world, and they have one small grocery store and one Walmart. And in that Walmart, in the watermelon capital of the world, watermelons, seedless watermelons, and seeded watermelons are both sold. However, the seeded watermelons are $2 more than the seedless.
Where is that town that you can do the watermelon crawl?
That it's Cordele.
Cordele. That's what I thought. Yeah.
But that's what he was talking about, old Tracy Bird.
Yeah.
But I'll do it if you need me to.
Okay, come on, let's hear it.
July.
What's a watermelon crawl?
Oh, Cynthia, we're gonna have to meet in person for me to show you.
Just Google the video on the country song Watermelon Crawl.
There
It
you go.
is great
Is that
video.
gonna be something like the pumpkin chunkin stuff that I would not
No,
really
it's a song where
with?
people eat watermelon at the watermelon festival, and they're doing a dance called the watermelon crawl.
A line dance.
Well, one of the greatest jazz songs ever written is Watermelon Man. That's a great song.
I did not know that. See,
Yeah,
you
look
taught
that
me
up.
something.
I bet you'll recognize it if you hear it. There's no lyrics to it.
All right.
It's just an instrumental, but it's fantastic. Watermelon Man.
I'm gonna put it on one of our social media videos in the background.
Do
this
it.
Yeah,
Do
give
it.
you a shout out.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. I know you got a lot of work to do. You're right at the heart of the busiest time of the year. I really appreciate you taking the time. And but you probably remember
Oh,
we have to put you through the payment for coming on as to this ritual, painful ritual that we call homegrown.
Oh.
Teresa with her puns has got something for us today to torture you, Rachel.
I'm ready.
Sorry. Okay, Teresa, what is the homegrown of the day?
Okay, so why did the yellow watermelon cross the road twice?
Okay, let's think. I'll give you some time to think about it. We try to guess these, as you know, Rachel. Why did the yellow watermelon cross the road twice? Rick, you got any ideas?
Boy, that is tough. I'm gonna have to think about that one.
Something about the double yellow line, I think. No?
No, yellow school bus.
Oh.
Any other guesses?
Cynthia, you got anything?
Why did the yellow watermelon cross the road twice? To prove he wasn't a chicken.
Ah, that's
Oh.
good. That's actually what I could laugh at.
That was
No,
good.
Usually we-
Instead
So
Rick's no,
I thought about the courage part of being yellow, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's because he's not yellow. He
because
is
he's a
yellow,
yellow
but he's not
belly.
Yellow,
scared.
but he's not a
He's got
chicken.
yellow
He's not a
belly.
chicken. That was good.
Okay, well, we're going to let you go. This has been fun. There's many more things as we'd love to talk about, but we'll just have to have you back.
I'm ready. You let me know. Make the call.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rachel.
Look for the best watermelons at your grocery store. Melon One is the brand. Go to melon1.com. Tell your supermarket retailers that you want Melon One brand in the stores. Okay, and we wish you the best of all. I can't say season anymore with you guys because you grow year round, but we wish you at least a great summer season. And hope it all
Happy
goes well.
National Watermelon Month, everybody.
Yes, celebrate. Okay, thank you, Rachel.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, listeners, for tuning in to the Produce Buzzers podcast, brought to you by Produce Buzz, the gathering place for lovers of fresh fruits and veggies. We hope you were entertained a bit and educated a lot about fresh produce. Be sure to join us next time, and please tell your friends to do so as well. Like, share, and comment on our Produce Buzz Facebook page, and check out our website at www.producebuzz.com. There you will find articles about fresh fruits and veggies, how to select, store, and prepare them, as well as lots of interesting facts about all the wonderful bounty the earth provides for us. Until next time, be fruitful and don't forget to veg out.